5-time spot is Mr. Alden, and he's not here this morning and not able to be here. I'll read you his letter. In response to your directions, I am responding to you and the board about my interest in joining the Berry County Board of Appeals. I am unable to attend the August 6, 2019 meeting of the Committee of the Whole to be interviewed. I will be in Alaska, completing the last state to visit on my bucket list. I will, however, be able to attend the Committee of the Whole meeting on August 20th, and we will need to contact him to make sure he can be here on the 21st. I have included my current resume for the Commissioner's review. Regards, James Alden. If we would like to interview the other candidates that are here today and make a decision later, that is up to you. Or if you feel comfortable after the interviews this morning, we can make a recommendation to the board for next week. Whatever the commissioner's pleasures are later when we take this up.
Hearing from all the candidates would be important in making a good choice.
I agree. So, let's see, Miss Graham isn't here right now. Mr. Schmidtke, are you prepared to go a little early?
I'm here.
All right.
Good morning.
You've been through this process before. Take a few minutes to explain or to tell us about yourself and explain why you would like to be involved in the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Well, I'm a resident of Rutland Township, have lived in Berry County almost 6 years. I think that commitment to government, or if you want to call it public service, in these areas is important for all of us. It helps us to learn, and I think that it bolsters the governmental process by individual commitment, and that basically is why I'm here. I have served on zoning boards of appeal in various areas as well as Rutland Township and have experience. I find that those issues that come to that organization generally involve extensive consideration and development of process, and hopefully an understanding of the law and in regards to the process itself, and that's one of the things that I enjoy and am interested in, so that's why I'm here today. And I'd be happy to respond to any questions you might have.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Parker.
Thank you for being willing to serve. You say you've had some experience with this before in other areas. What do you find to be the biggest challenge? Is it to, I'll let you, open-ended question.
As far as service on the Zoning Board of Appeals?
Yeah.
Or in any area? Well, generally, I think it's just developing an understanding of the individual situation that occurs that prompts the meeting or prompts the appeal. And then hearing all sides and hopefully making a decision that meets the best interests of the community.
Okay. What about the actual law?
Well, obviously, that is the controlling factor in developing a position. I think that when you consider making an allowance in regards to the zoning that exists, sometimes the zoning aspect is very broad and may not fully address the issue that exists in a particular place. And so considering that area or that individual piece of property, for instance, is in relation to the broader area is the thing that is the largest requirement in the process.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Jackson.
Morning. Thanks for your application, Jerry. With your experience on Rutland and on those various boards, one of the conversations we keep having in the county is the need for more affordable housing. How do you take those zoning laws, which currently require you to have over an acre if there's no infrastructure in there, how do you make that blend with a need, kind of serve the population a little better, or is that just too deep?
Well, certainly it's a problem that I think housing overall is extremely difficult for many people, and some of it has to do obviously with income levels, and consequently I think government has not responded to the need for low-income housing, and that providing that resource to the community I think doesn't really enter into the consideration of lot size. It's more a matter of need in the community than it is trying to establish equity as far as a lot size goes. Quite often, lot size is restrictive, but that unfortunately is not a zoning aspect. That is something that's controlled by the boards within the communities that experience that issue, the question that you raised.
Health department, a lot of different factors weigh into it.
There are, and there again, like the health department, you have the requirement of water and septic, and the distance that has to be maintained between them, and consequently that dictates some as to lot size. There are a lot of issues, in other words.
Yeah, how do you address some of that? I mean, if you see something, I know that there was an instance in Hope Township where they looked at it and decided that their zoning was just basically outdated in some things. How do you review that? I mean, you've got some experience on this. I'm sure you've seen some of this going through. How do you make those changes that are beneficial moving forward for the community, but still, I mean, people want to keep that piece of country, privacy, there's all these issues. It's like, go ahead and change it, but just don't change it in my neighborhood, you know?
Well, I don't know that I have an answer for that, it's probably one of those discussions that you and I could have for hours and come up with a lot of good ideas or potential, changes to the situation. It's strange that you should mention my privacy. We have 14 acres, and most of it's wooded. And recently, property behind us was sold, and 5 new residences have been built. And it's somehow disturbing to me that I go out my back door and look across and I can see these roofs that I didn't see anything but trees before. But at the same time, we have to remember that we're a community. We reside in a community. And I don't think that we can look into the future and expect that the future is always going to be the same. And so we have to learn to live with situations in the best possible manner. We need to look to developing them in the best possible manner. And I think that zoning boards, when they identify issues, need to communicate that. And quite often they don't.
Thank you.
Commissioner Connor?
Thanks for applying, Jerry, and thanks for the service that you do on the other boards and for the county. I appreciate that, but I don't have any questions.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gibson?
Thanks for applying. I see that you've served on other boards. Have you attended all their meetings?
As far as I know, I try to.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Smoker?
I don't know how to put this delicately, but have you had any dealings with the zoning or zoning board of appeals? I guess what I'm getting at is, do you have an axe to grind?
I could respond,
I know you're good enough.
John, by
You can
saying
tell
I
them,
keep
can't
my
you?
axe sharp, so I don't need to grind it. But the only time that I can refer to in Berry County, and that was in Rutland Township, I wanted to put up a sign. And I had to apply for a permit, which I did and which I received. And so, there was no issue there, and, just paying the fee, that was it, so. Other than that, no.
Thank you, Jerry.
Commissioner Geiger.
Thank you for your application. I just have one question. You have sat on many boards in your distinguished career in local government. If a decision is reached by a board, but it is done in a way that does not hold true to Robert's rules, is that decision fair?
The decision itself may be fair. The process generally should be followed. And I guess that I am a stickler, and I think quite often appointments are made to boards, and when people are seated, they don't always understand the process. And to allow for equity, or to ensure equity, I think that an understanding of process is very important. And one thing that I notice, and I think that you've raised this question because of it, is that we have little understanding of the law that involves the process that you asked me about. And there are two things, and the more important thing is the OMA, the Open Meetings Act, because it makes specific requirements of how you do your job. And I feel that that's important because it promotes openness, it assures that there is fair treatment, and that each person gets to address the issue as it is arising. And I think that is really important. Let's say it's the most important part of the democratic process.
You would say that following the Roberts rules is the most important part of the process as a board member?
No, I think following the Open Meetings Act,
Following the law.
following the
Yeah.
law, is the most important, yes.
So, a follow-up to that, this Board of Commissioners, as with every Board of Commissioners, appoints citizens from within the community to serve on these boards. And many do not have an experience in local government, but they all take an oath to do the job to the best of their ability. Is a board member that has never sat on a board, that is unfamiliar with Robert's rules, in dereliction of their duty if they don't follow the Robert's rules? Are they a good board member if they don't know?
If, I guess that your question is a little bit, for me, is a little bit too broad, because my impression is, number one, you could appoint any of the people here in this room now, and they may have no understanding of what OMA stands for. And given that, then come into a meeting and not follow the process. That doesn't mean that there is anything intrinsically wrong with their performance.
That was my question. Can you be a good board member without having the experience that many of us have here with Robert's rules?
Yes, I think you can.
Okay.
And I think that the other side of it is that you have to be willing to accept that the process exists, and that when made aware of it, you agree to follow it.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
My colleagues always come up with the best questions, and then I'm always left with, what can I think up? I actually do not have any questions for you today, sir, but thank you for agreeing to go early.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Stacy Graham. Good morning.
Good morning.
See you all.
Take a few minutes to tell us about yourself and explain why you want to be involved in the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Thank you so much. So I obtained my first job upon completion of my degree at Grand Valley State University at Pennock Hospital in 2003. I worked there for 6.5 years in marketing, customer service, helping with Pennock Village in that management aspect, and also volunteer coordination. I fell in love with this county and this community, and so I purchased my first home in 2007 here while I was still employed with the hospital. Upon leaving employment with Pennock, I worked for 10 months as a project coordinator at Berry County Community Mental Health. And then I interviewed for actually a county job in late 2011, and I obtained an office manager and event coordinator position at Charlton Park. And I worked there from 2012 until July of last year. In the process, I became familiar with Rutland Township because I would go in there to pay my taxes, and I got to know Jim Carr as a supervisor and let him know that I had some extra time to devote to any sort of township matters that wouldn't impact my full-time employment. So in 2011, December of 2011, I was appointed to the Joint Planning Alliance for Rutland Charter Township. And what that particular board does is it works with representatives from Berry County, Rutland Township, the City of Hastings, Carlton Township, and Hastings Charter Township. And I have been continuously employed on that board since 2011. That opened up an opportunity in 2015 for me to be appointed to the Planning Commission for Rutland Charter Township. Been there ever since. And then in 2016, there was an opening on the Joint Planning Commission, which is representatives from the City of Hastings and also Rutland Charter Township as well. So I've been doing that since 2016. Last year, my husband and I had our first child, and so unfortunately I had to resign from full-time employment with the county to be a mom. And but I'm still hoping to stay involved in local affairs. I got a call from Larry Watson, who's the current Rutland Township supervisor, and he had mentioned that this particular opportunity on the Berry County ZBA was available, and he said, you know, if you've got one night a month that's open that you can take away from your family time, you should apply. So I gave it some thought, and I actually did. And so here I am. I enjoy this town, I enjoy this community, and I just thought I would throw my hat in the ring. So
Thank you. We'll start with Commissioner Geiger.
Thank you for your application, Stacy, and very good presentation. I did work with you on the Joint Planning Alliance, and that you were the only woman, I think, on that board for.
Janae from Hastings Charter was on there for
Yeah.
a little while.
And it could be a gruff group of local guys, so I applaud you for hanging in there.
Thank you. Thank you.
How do you go about making a fair decision in a dispute between a homeowner and what the zoning says? What's your process?
Sure, that's a very good question. I think that you really need to listen to both sides. I like the fact that in my research that I've done about this particular board, that it seems like Mr. McManus really does give the neighboring properties that are potentially going to be impacted by this variance the opportunity to express their concerns either in person or in writing. I like the fact that he goes through the entire process with the property owner too and allows them to make their case. I am a big proponent of property owners' rights, but I think that kind of goes both ways. You know, if you're going to be, for instance, on a lake blocking your neighbor's view, you know, you've got to be fair. So I guess that's kind of my process there. So
you really have to see
it's two sides of the coin because yes, perhaps, you know, your deck might be extending 5 feet out toward the lakeside, but then you're also going to have to potentially deal with the ramifications from the neighboring parcel. And yeah, you can't please everybody, but I think that's the exciting thing about the ZBA is that you can actually get all of the sides of the story and while you're making an informed decision, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you for your application.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smoker.
Thank you for applying, Stacy. I was going to ask Gerald this too and forgot, must be old age. Seems you and him are both from Rutland Township, and Rutland has their own zoning, not Berry County. Do you see any problems arising from this or any conflict of interest from this?
I gave some good thought to that as well before I put my application in. I really don't see it. I see it as an asset, my community background and my Rutland Township background, because they do have their own zoning board of appeals there. I don't see a lot of potential conflicts of interest. I just see it as more or less, I have more of an education potentially being on some of these other commissions to be able to make good, informed decisions for Berry County.
Thank you. That's all I have.
I have no questions, Stacy. Thanks for applying.
Thanks.
Commissioner Connor.
Thanks for applying, Stacy. I don't have any questions.
Thanks, Ruby.
Commissioner Jackson.
Nope, I've worked with Stacy on a couple boards and always done a great job, so I appreciate your application on this as well. Ben kind of covered my question as well as far as how you interact with the law versus those relationships and things like that, so I appreciate the application. Thanks.
Thanks for applying, Stacy. Are you familiar with the Open Meetings Act and
Yes.
what it says?
Yes,
Okay.
based on my work with Charlton Park, we had to follow some pretty stringent, if we wanted to have any special meeting, we had to do a 3-day advance notice posting. And it's very important to be transparent and, even on a park board, not to discount that, but we have very important business that we do at this level, park level, health department, everything, so.
Well, thanks for applying. I have no more questions.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Stacy. It's been a while since I saw you because I was on the Charlton Park Board. You wear motherhood very well.
Oh, gee, thanks, Heather.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I miss seeing you every month.
I really don't have any questions for you today, though, but thanks. We'll make a decision sometime after we have the opportunity to interview Mr. Alden. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time.
All righty, we are a little bit ahead of schedule. Is Mr. Haney here? You ready to go? All right. So let me get my... Okay. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the attached resolution supporting Thornapple Manor, exploring the addition of independent and assisted living units, as well as adult daycare services at Thornapple Manor.
So moved.
Support.
Moved by Parker, support by Gibson. Mr. Haney, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time this morning to hear what we're thinking. This process for me started back in January. I've been on the EDA board for a number of years, and we've been talking about the housing issues here in Berry County, and I had in my mind compartmentalized that into a workforce issue and not something in our realm of expertise or service. In January, I attended a meeting at the Berry Community Foundation where they talked about the housing problem, and listening to realtors and understanding that the problem was across all economic stratas, across all age groups, that the inventory problem existed because folks that wanted to buy a home couldn't buy a starter home because the folks in the starter home couldn't upgrade to a bigger family home. The folks in the bigger family home couldn't move because there wasn't a place to downsize to condos or apartments or other opportunities. So it was a broader problem than just a workforce issue in the number of units. And it got my gears thinking a little bit. So I went back and thought about it for a month or so, and I thought, we really should maybe look at this, and maybe there is something we can do. So I contacted a couple of folks about doing a market study, and I got some bids, and when I had one, I went to my board, and I should recognize Chelsea Foster, our vice chair of our board, is with me today, as well as Becky DeHaan, one of our directors, are both with me as well. And I said, would you support me just doing a market study and spending a few bucks and saying, is there a demand, is there a need? We might come back and say that there's not a demand and there's not a need, and if that's the case, we'll just drop this. And they said, okay. I said, go ahead and do it. Well, then I went and actually put an RFP together and put a number of questions that I wanted to have answered in that RFP out. solicited bids, and those bids came back a little bit higher than I had anticipated. So I went back to the board, and again, they said, that's fine, go ahead and do that. And so we commissioned the study, and we got the study. I drafted this in mid-June, and I've been perusing it and was surprised by the numbers. I expected to see, just based on the conversations that I had been having in the county and the anecdotal stuff, that stories that I had heard, that there would be some demand. I didn't anticipate this size of demand. And on page 5 of the report, which you should all have, you'll see that this market study represents 60 additional independent living units at market rate. And this is specifically looking at senior housing folks. 60 additional assisted living and memory care units, and then 22 additional daycare slots. But there is also 220 additional independent living units that would be more affordable housing or subsidized housing demand. So in total, 280 independent living unit demand in the county. This is all done at a very high level. This is done by folks at Plant Moran, their Living Forward group. They're based out of Chicago, and they do this regionally and across the country. And so they're just looking at demographic census data and pulling all the different sources and coming up with this very high look at the data. And so it's still in a very broad planning stage or step for us to consider, what, if anything, do we do with this, and do we move forward? And, my next step in this process would be to do some focus studies, polling. Would folks be willing to move out to the Thornapple Manor area? What would they be willing to pay? What is the market rate? There's a bazillion questions that I would like to get out of that polling data, but that would be the next step. And then perhaps designing some buildings and putting some cost of that together and saying, does this make financial sense? Because one of the requirements that I have and that I'm very adamant about with my board, and that I'm very adamant with you and to the citizens, is that this is not going to cost taxpayer money. That we're going to do something that would be self-sustaining and self-supporting. And if it can't do that, if the pro forma financials come back and say it would need some kind of support, then I'm not interested in going there, because I don't think that this is something we should put as a burden on the taxpayers. So this would be completely self-supporting, self-sustaining project. If we move forward, that's one of my must-haves. And so I guess we're asking for you today, if you would like to let me to continue to explore this. If I go down this path, I could easily spend a couple $100,000 in blueprints and accounting work and pro forma statements. I'm more than happy to do that. I just don't want to do that if at the end of the day, the County Board of Commissioners is going to say, hey, we're really not excited about this at all. So if you would like me to spend those dollars and go down this road, I'm more than happy to do that. If it's not something that you see as a need for the county or something that the county should be involved in, I'm okay with that too. So I'd just rather know it now than after I spend a lot of money. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Parker.
Yeah, Don, you mentioned subsidized housing. What would it be subsidized with?
There's a couple of different avenues, and I really didn't understand this. So there's the MSHDA programs where we set our market rate rent, and then MSHDA looks at their sliding scale income and says, we'll pay, 25, 50, 75% of their rent because that's all they can afford. There's also another program, which I learned about through these groups, which I didn't quite understand. I'm not sure I still fully understand it, but where we get tax credits. And I said, but I'm a county government, I don't pay taxes, what does tax credits do for me? He goes, no, it's not for you. What you do is you apply and you get these tax credits, and say you apply and this project is worth $1 million in tax credits. You sell those tax credits to larger companies, maybe a local company, maybe a statewide company. An investor, somebody that owns a private business that does pay income taxes, and they can take that credit, put it on their taxes to reduce their tax burden, but it's their way of kind of subsidizing or helping with the affordable housing. So there's a different, and they said that there are other mechanisms out there as well that we can explore. So we'd look at all of those and say what makes the most sense for us and what makes the most sense. So we would actually get that $1 million, and then we would be able to use that to help fund the project. And then we have to keep rents at a certain rate in order for them to be able to take the credits. So we have a contract in terms of how much our rent is
I think we're gonna see a lot more of that because HUD is not providing subsidized anymore.
Right,
And that's a consideration then.
yeah. And I understand that there's more mechanisms out there than we just talked about a couple in my phone conference with these folks.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for exploring this opportunity. I don't speak for the whole board, but it sounds like a worthy endeavor. My question is, what is Thornapple Manor's flexibility? Can you provide these housing units in somewhere other than the Thornapple Manor campus? Is that a possibility? Because we're going to be going through our master plan for the county in terms of planning and zoning, and that property that Thornapple Manor sits on might not be the most, there might be better places for the population that we're seeking to serve.
Yes. So that's a good question. Thank you. First, there are other medical care facilities, and I guess I should mention this as well, that there are other medical care facilities throughout the state. There are only 34 of us now. And there are some that do have other services that they provide. So it's not unusual for a medical care facility to provide services other than the skilled nursing component. For example, Iron County does have an assisted living unit. Pinecrest in the UP, I think, has home care services and does some other things. So it's not outside of our, and I consider this part of our mission, particularly if we do the subsidized and affordable rate housing. Would it be beneficial from my perspective to have it out there on our campus? Yes. We've got the infrastructure there, the management, all of us would be available, easy access. One of the things that I was looking at and want to have answered is, would an independent living center and an assisted living center need to be in walking distance to amenities in downtown, shopping, restaurants, that type of thing? And from my review of the folks that I do know, like Friendship Village in Kalamazoo is near the malls, but it's 3 or 4 minute drive, and it's not walkable for most seniors. Most of the centers that I know of in the Grand Rapids area are not necessarily in walking distance to those types of things, so that's not necessarily an impediment to us moving forward. Could we locate it elsewhere? I suppose we could. I mean, that's part of a legal question we would have to ask, and we would have to acquire the land and the property. And I think, quite frankly, that's one of the problems that other development. One of the first questions I had to ask myself when I saw this study was, okay, this is too good to be true, you know. And usually, if that's too good to be true, there's a reason for it. Yeah. Why is no developer jumping on these numbers if it's this? If the demand is this high? And I think part of the problem is land availability. You know, coming down here and trying to find a plot of land to develop is not easy. It's just not there. So I think that's one of the impediments. Having that land already there makes it a little bit more doable, I guess, from that perspective. I don't think that there's anything that prevents us from putting it anywhere else either, no. So I'm happy to explore that. That was a long answer.
Just to, thank you for that answer. That did answer my question. But just to clarify, you're proceeding with this request with the assumption that it would be on the property on your current campus?
I'm proceeding with this request with the assumption that that would take place, because that makes the most logical sense to me. But I'm not opposed to exploring other opportunities. I'm not, as long as, again, the financial numbers make sense and everything works in alignment, I don't have any problem with that, but it does have to be self-supporting from a financial standpoint.
I understand.
That would be my overriding goal. Other than that, wherever we put it, I'm okay with that.
Great. Thank you, Don.
Yeah.
Any questions for Mr. Haney?
I had a question.
Go ahead.
Great report, Don. We could almost do a seminar to go through the entire report based on all the things I'm reading in here. The depth of that report's pretty amazing. But we won't have the time to go into all the detail on it. But Ben answered one of my questions because it was about the area. When you talk about 280 units, 60 assisted living units, you've got a campus that could support that type of a structure out there right now?
I think we do. We have two Class A 12-inch wells for water. The question would be sewer services. We only have a 6-inch forced main coming into the city. We'd have to address that. I think that would probably be too small. And I don't presume to anticipate building all of this. I mean, there are other developments going up that are being discussed in town and around town for housing. And I don't want to push us to a point where we have occupancy issues. So I don't see us building all 340 units by any stretch of the imagination. I don't want to go that far. Again, as long as we think we can reasonably fill the units and keep it on a financial stability standpoint, then I'm happy to explore that level. But there would be some infrastructure things that we would probably have to address, sewer being probably the biggest one that I can think of.
In competition, evaluation of competition, obviously, you know, the demand for housing is everywhere. It's not just in Berry County, but, you know, when you look at that market study in there, do you see anything on the radar that prohibits? I like your previous answer on a phased-in approach, because that makes more sense. In any development phase, you build basically what you can fill and go. So.
Right. Yep. And I did, the folks that were doing this study, I stay in regular contact with them about any projects that I do hear that are coming up, so they're aware of what else is on the horizon, so that we factor that into these numbers, and then whether or not they're focusing on senior. Again, this study is looking strictly at senior citizen housing, not the overall housing market. So they're just looking at the demand for senior housing.
Okay. Did they give you any cost estimates as far as if you were going to do all of this at once, what the cost would be versus, you know, if we did 40 units, you know?
No, that's what the next step would be, and that's where it would take me about $150,000 to $200,000 to come up with that answer. And so, and then whether or not it was financially feasible to do so. And so they can help me with that. Obviously, it's an accounting firm. They're going to be able to put pro forma information together. We'll work with our construction folks that will tell us what the cost of construction will be. And we'll try to put all those numbers together. And I would think that, you know, we could scale construction back to a point or build it in a fashion that is affordable. I don't know what that means, whether that means cottage 4-unit condos or whether we're doing a 2 or 3 story building. I don't have those answers to make sure that it's affordable for us to build and then to be financially sustainable as well as affordable for a rent. But that's what the $150,000 to $200,000 will answer all those questions.
Okay, is that a cost that's being paid for out of the fund balance right now?
Yes, we would pay for that out of our operation costs. Yeah.
And it looked like if at some point this goes forward, what you're looking for is a resolution of support. This is an exploration, but at some point it would need the county's good faith and credit to back any projects.
Absolutely. So my board has already authorized continuing to explore this with a resolution of their own. We're bringing this resolution to you, which is kind of in line with the resolution that the DHS board has already approved. But at the end of the day, and that's really what I want the commission to understand, is that we're going to be needing to use county land, whether it's on our property or near our property or somewhere else. We'll have to acquire that, which is another cost hurdle, which is, you know, part of the logic of having it out there. But then that while this I intend to be financially sustainable on its own, we'll still need bonding and mortgage debt to build the buildings. So we would need the County Board of Commissioners to say, we'll pledge the full faith and credit of the county to do this project.
And has there been any discussions with Michael on this?
Yes.
Between your board? Okay.
Yes.
Michael, any input that you'd like to share with the board? If I could.
No, Don's done a lot of work with regard to Plant Rand, so there's still a lot of work to be done. I think Don's laid it out fairly well. As we go through the process, understanding if the need of the process, pro forma shows that it can pay for itself, with the board then ultimately land, and more importantly, it would most likely require some type of a bond, not a millage, but a bond, and that's the borrowing part of it. Would the county be willing to pledge its full faith and credit? And the reason that you do that is to secure competitive interest rates, and That's not unique. We do that with the fact that maybe it was Commissioner Connor was asking some questions relating to that. And I said, I can't remember a time that we didn't pledge full faith and credit. If it got to a point that the county said, no, we aren't willing to do that because we're concerned with the ability to repay the loan through the proceeds of the project, we most likely wouldn't support the project. If that makes sense.
And the last time we did do that was with our cottage construction, that those bonds are being paid for out of our operations and not out of a millage. So that was a $6 million bond issue, if I recall, back in 2012.
Okay. Well, that answers my question. I know there's a need for it, so I appreciate the depth of this report and the information, but I'm sure there'll be more questions going forward, but this is something I think I can support, so thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Conner?
Thank you. I didn't know David had his hand up, So yes, I did talk to Michael yesterday. I wanted to know about, you have 2 debts out there for both the renovation of the facility and the cottages. And so your comments about you wouldn't want to do this unless you could support it from just the proceeds of the rentals and the units themselves. So I appreciate that statement. I know that you're very, very, very frugal. So the other question I had was about the adult daycare, because the study said there was a calculated 22. Is that in addition to the 9 that the COA currently has in their daycare?
It would be in addition to what is currently in the market, yes.
Okay, so I didn't know if they took that into effect. And is that something that you really want to pursue, and would you have that in the main facility or in the new facility?
I'm willing to explore that. I don't really want to compete with the COA. I think they do a fantastic job. I know Tammy's here as well. I did have a conversation with her this past week to let her know about this report and this study. And I'm more than happy to explore that if that's part of what the county would like us to do, and to do that in concert with Tammy and make sure that we're, just like we partnered with the YMCA to do our Generations Daycare for our staff's kids. I could see some kind of partnership with COA, or that we could work with them and build a facility and partner with them to run it, type of thing. So I would want to do that in concert or collaboration with the COA, but I'd certainly more than happy to explore that if that's what the county wishes.
Thanks for your flexibility and thanks for your answer. Appreciate all the hard work you do, Don.
You bet.
Any questions on this side? Commissioner Smoker?
Have you had any conversations yet with the city of Hastings on the sewer system?
I have not.
Maybe one of the first things before you spent a couple $100,000?
It certainly would be a conversation that we need to have earlier rather than later, absolutely. And the township, we have a 3-way agreement, if you will, because of the expansion and when we put the sewer line in with the county, the city of Hastings, and the township of Hastings. So not just the city, but also just have to have a conversation with Jim Brown at the Hastings Township as well. Yeah.
Any other commissioner questions?
It's a good question. I noticed that the market rate units projected require an income of roughly $53,000. And the low-income housing units are designed for $130,000. What about the people who make $1,000? That's kind of a large group.
It is, and we'll look at that through as we dive into these numbers and look at the pro formas itself. This study is done at a very high level out of folks in Chicago that are looking at census data and demographic data, and I don't know where all they pull the data from, and they just set marks in the sand. So a market rate, we'll say 53,000 and above income, and affordable 30,000 and below. So I think that those were arbitrary numbers at this level, but we can certainly dive into that and how we can, and again, some of that might be the funding mechanisms in terms of the tax credit program, how that works, as to where the rents will fall. So we'll have to, that'll be part of the in-depth study.
Thank you, sir. I'm excited about the opportunities and the foresight that you have for thinking outside of the box and how to change what's going on here for the better.
Thank you.
That being said, is there any further questions or discussion for Mr. Haney?
Where would the money come from for the study?
I'll be paying for that out of our operational funds.
You just want to make sure we would back
Yeah, I don't want,
the idea.
yeah, it's going to cost us $150,000 to $200,000 to do all this, and I'd just soon not spend it if you're going to say no, so.
All righty. There being no further discussion before the committee, the question before the committee is to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the attached resolution supporting Thornapple Manor, exploring the addition of independent and assisted living units as well as adult daycare services at Thornapple Manor. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The item is approved.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, sir. Next before the committee is Marilyn Smith. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to schedule a public hearing regarding the CDBG Emergency Program Income Guidelines at the regular meeting of the Berry County Board of Commissioners on August 27, 2019, and after the public hearing to approve the CDBG Program Income Emergency Repair Guidelines.
So moved.
Support.
Moved by Geiger, support by Gibson. The floor is yours.
It's a change this year, and I haven't met some of you, so I haven't been here for a couple of years, but it's nice to be back. We actually have a little bit of money that was program income money, and because it was over $35,000 that we received from July 1st of 2018 to June 30th of 2019, it's under federal compliance. Because it's under federal compliance, we have to have a public hearing. MEDC has taken over the Community Development Block Grant Program, which is where that money came from to begin with, because these are loan repayments. And it's only for emergency. And the emergency has been stated and classified as a specific leak in a roof, no heat, no water. It would have to be classified as an emergency based on MEDC and HUD's description of emergency. So that's the only thing that we can do. We no longer have a program where we have a variety of options.
Any questions for Marilyn?
Thank you. Marilyn, is there going to be any restrictions on where these loans will be able to be?
Anywhere in the county.
Anywhere in the county? Okay, thank you. I know in the past, sometimes we've had restrictions.
Particularly with, they targeted with a CDBG program when they had placemaking, probably 6 years ago. And they were communities that were designated in the master plan, and Jim could probably specify those communities. And then the home program was specifically in the city of Hastings.
Right.
One we had in the city of Middleville, and that was it.
But this is countywide.
Countywide.
Thank you.
I know that Community Action Agency is having issues with their CDBG monies as well. So they are shuffling and doing things different too, so.
They probably get emergency housing money, yeah, and that's a little bit different than this money. This is specifically for homeowner. You have to be a homeowner.
Right. They're having some of the same things where the
The
state
has
is.
restricted
Yeah.
it.
So.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate.
Are there any further questions for Marilyn? Hearing none, the question before the committee is to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to schedule a public hearing regarding CDBG Emergency Program Income Guidelines at the regular meeting of the Berry County Board of Commissioners on August 27th, 2019, and after the public hearing to approve the CDBG Program Income Emergency Repair Guidelines. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The item is approved. Sure.
Thank you. I'll see you on the 27th.
Thank you, ma'am. We're going to take just a short 5-minute break. We'll be back at 9:40.